property matters here on Dublin South FM. You can contact the show on Twitter, Facebook, or indeed LinkedIn at iPropertyRadio, or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your host for today is myself, Carol Tallon, and I'm delighted to be joined by Helen McCormack, owner of Helen McCormack Estate Agents based in Limerick. Helen, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Carol. It's lovely to be here and meet you today.
Well, I'm delighted to have a chance to speak to you because we know anecdotally that estate agents right around the country are exceptionally busy since since we reopened, while the restrictions are still a challenge, I'm interested to hear the experience that you have, because you're working I won't say one person operation, but you've a very small team down in Limerick. So I'm wondering, how has your company managed the last couple of months, and particularly the last couple of weeks of reopening?
Yeah, I mean, we've very much looked forward to reopening after the lockdown. We were extremely busy, however, during the lockdown because, it wasn't the first time that I myself have been through a difficult period, because we've lived through the last recession, so nothing was as bad as that. But at the same time, it's, very conscious of, it's not what happens, it's how you manage it. And, immediately the government went out and offered so many different incentives, and there was so much business coaching available as well, and programs. And, when the lockdown started, I went to the 14-week program myself about pivoting the business. And a huge pivot for me and many others that I can see as well in our industry was the move to social media, particularly when, there isn't visibility in terms of meeting your clients coming into the office. You think, well, visibility means credibility and ultimately, sales, lettings and profitability. So how do I make myself visible during this period? So believe it or not, up to then, even though the business was successful, didn't have a social media presence. So instantly the basics are the Facebook account, the Instagram account, start promoting properties, and then, myself on my own LinkedIn presence. And, so that kind of, gives you confidence as well that you're still out there, even though you're locked down, because at the time we didn't know how long this was going to go on for. So being out there then and seeing other agents, and that's a huge part of it. What I really enjoyed is, seeing faces maybe that I'd only seen at seminars or CPD events, and you're going, oh, they're such and such high, and that's what they're doing, and you start to like it. And, previously there was a kind of all this competitive factor, between agents. And I think the social media has, really demonstrated how, we're all in different territories. So let's all support each other. And, I've said this before as well, to myself, that since the PSRA came in and the clear boundaries around client instructions, there isn't that competitive cutthroat piece between local agents, because boundaries around the client instruction are so clear that it makes for really good relationships. So on top of that, plus the new, for a lot of us, presence on the likes of LinkedIn and social media, there's great camaraderie now and support, and we're bouncing off each other and getting ideas off each other. Some of the more braver of us have gone out and done video first, and others are following suit, which is great.
Helen, there's so much good stuff there in what you've said. Like, first of all, I'm genuinely surprised that, your business is more than a decade old, and yet you're only seeing the need for social media or a more online presence for yourself over lockdown. What was the marketing of the business like over the decade before that?
Well, I think like property, I think the property market and business is quite local, for me as, an independent trader with a manager in the office. So it's all local. So business for me was all about building long-term relationships locally. So I would target business through networking groups in Limerick, and I'm still members of those groups as well. So we would refer business to each other. And then I think most growth in local businesses comes organically through satisfied customers who refer onto the next person. And, through the recovery in terms of the rental management sector, a lot of those rental managed properties organically turned into sales, which turned into further management and further sales. There was a lot of organic growth. And if you get a good name locally, again, the name you can trust, that's really another issue that's often been a huge issue for our customers. It's trust with estate agents. Is there transparency? Is there really a bid on that property? I can't believe we're still hearing that actually sometimes. because of the regulation. And, you know, people don't like to be questioned that way. They have their own integrity. But all those issues were always out there. So, you know, being able to build trust and relationships, I think property and the business and a good business and auctioneering and estate agency it's never about a one-hit wonder. It's always about the relationship and building relationships. And if you sell a house for someone's mom or dad, you get the son, daughter. Like there's a cycle of property. You know, first of all, you're a student, you go in, you want your student rental, you come out, then you get a good job, or you get onto your employment career, you start saving for a mortgage, you need to rent during that period, then you go into the first-time buyer sphere, then, you know, the family starts to grow, you might go into the second-time buyer sphere, you might move on then into your first investment property. So it's a lifelong relationship with people, and if you stay local, you can actually have that.
Yeah, Helen, you're dead right. It comes down to reputation, and you know, every week on the show, and indeed for the last number of years, you know, I've had a very strong focus on technology, and I think maybe because I talk about technology and prop tech every week, that I maybe don't give the time to really reinforce the basics, which are, you know, property really is about people, and the technology that's being used is just to enable the people working in property. And in terms of building trust, you know, from my point of view, I think technology is a great way to bring transparency that feeds that trust. But there's so many ways to do that. And, you know, in a way, when I have a conversation like this, it reminds me that, you know, technology really is just the tool. But actually, the basic relationships in property really haven't changed so much. And in fact, if anything, they've probably gotten stronger, and that need for that need to be a trusted name in your locality has probably become even more pronounced over the last number of years. You know, one of the things I've noticed is this move and this rise in independent estate agencies. You know, we really saw that coming out of the last crash, and it was a trend we picked up on early. But it was a number of years before we had any stats to show that actually there has been a rise in independent estate agents in Ireland. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's a lot of you know, good salespeople working in the estate agency industry. There's a lot of people who put a high value on relationships, and people like to do business with people they know, like, and trust. So if an individual feels they're good at, and the Irish, I think, always have an entrepreneurial spirit. The overheads can be low because, you know, you can take a smaller type office. So then if somebody's good at that and they're committed and dedicated, they feel, and they have a strong base. A lot of people have connections in the sporting groups. Limerick is a fantastic sporting city, and they feel they have a network that they would be able to justify having a business out of, you know, could grow from there. And I think, you know, it's just, if you're dynamic and you're committed, and, you know, you feel maybe it's more financially viable to go out on your own, you know, give it a shot, and you have your education and you can go for your license. It's a really good idea. And you know, so like, why not if people can?
Yeah, and look, geography does play a part. You're based in Limerick City. Limerick really feels like a city on the move, and you know, it's almost a cliche to say that because it feels like that's been said you know, for a number of years. But you know, we can see the really large scale projects that are happening, the big urban regeneration projects that are working, both public and private. There's such an appetite there. Maybe give us some insight what it's like across the property market in Limerick at the moment.
Yeah, well, as you said, Carol, in relation to the city itself, I mean, I don't know if people outside Limerick realise this, and if they've looked at the 2030 and 2041 vision for Limerick, the plans, but it's so exciting because Limerick and the Midwest now, not Limerick on its own, Limerick, which is the centre city of the Midwest region, which we call Clare, Tipperary, and Limerick, is going to be the next complement to Dublin, you know, and a huge critical component of, you know, our future economic growth. I mean, there's so much going on, starting with inside the city. I mean, you probably heard last week, LIT just achieved university status, which is phenomenal. We have UL, the Kenny Business School there, which is constantly growing. The opera site has now started as well. the development of the 10-acre site, previously the Cleves Toffee factory, which will take it's only 7 years. We all know that's going to fly. Like it's, 13 years since the property crash. Think about that. So there's amazing stuff and it's not something that's going to happen. It's already started. It's already happening. And then we have like the renovation of the Georgian Quarter as well. And that's another thing maybe people outside Limerick may not be aware of, that Limerick, next to Dublin, has the biggest Georgian Quarter in Ireland. And the plans there to actually, the investments to maybe bring people back in to live, renovate a lot of those properties. Some of them are actually vacant, and to live there residentially as well. So it's not even something that's going to happen. We're in it. It's happening. It's extremely exciting. The plan is really for Limerick and the Midwest to be the next Dublin. The infrastructure plans are in place and being developed as well. We have, the sporting capital, the cultural city, a very historical city. So it's very, very exciting. And, the multinationals, have always spotted Limerick as, and that's something that's going back like, 20, 30 years, have always spotted Limerick as, a place to watch. And they're in here now for all this growth. I mean, the building Northern Trust built, in the last few years is phenomenal. We've consistent growth in the pharmaceutical and all the huge companies we have since Regeneron came in here in 2014. And that has just drove on, the economy, the demand for property, everything. And it's actually continuing all the time because of the competitiveness, the education, the quality of the graduates, the quality of our third level institutions. The fact as well, I think Limerick has a lovely, you can live in the city, but yet feel you have this almost country kind of lifestyle, being able to connect to the Atlantic Way. Nobody complains about commuting. Like even 30 minutes, you can have, you can live in a beautiful rural place, like a lakeside town, between 30 and 50 minutes outside Limerick. So when you consider all that, I mean, the sky's the limit, isn't it, really, in terms of all development?
Well, let's talk about affordability then, because Limerick certainly has a lot going for it. And that's been true for quite a long time. I'm not sure how well it's been marketed, though, in the past.
Yeah.
But in terms of, so there's a couple of big things. You already have UL, and now LIT has achieved university status. We're seeing this growing medtech and pharma industry, which, we would assume then that they're able to capture maybe some, or certainly retain graduates, so they can maybe encourage graduates after they're finished their university training to actually stay in the region. And that's something that not all university towns and cities can do. But in terms of then buying and renting properties, can early stage career people actually afford to live and rent comfortably in Limerick?
They can at the moment, but prices are increasing. And Limerick, again, has seen huge increases in rents in the last 2 years in particular, but starting in the last 3 years. And, I have thought, ironically, the 4% rule, which, was brought in, due to the crisis situation in Dublin, and rightly so, ironically, actually pushed on the rents to jump quicker. Because, having managed rents over many years, many landlords just kind of thought, it's fine if I have a good tenant, I'm quite happy. There's no need to upset the apple cart, from my experience anyway. And then when the 4%, came in, people kind of thought, they didn't fully understand really the regulations around it. And they started to just really rush to put up rents, kind of feeling maybe that, we won't be able to get good value out of our rents going forward. But look, having said that, compared to other places in the country, it's still, people can still afford it. And we've a huge amount of markets within the Limerick market, if I can say that, Carol. Like you can get a 1-bed can go from like 550 right up to, 1,200, depending if it's an exclusive development. You can have a 2-bed from 700, because some of them could be historic and they might have got caught in that RPZ and they're limited, mightn't have been fast enough to put up a rent, right up to 1,600. The 3-beds can go from 850 up to 1,800. So the 4-beds from 950 to 2,000, etc. 5-beds from 1,100 to 2,400. So sometimes when you see national statistics, you might know where to look, but if you're local, you can actually see there's a huge gamut of different prices. And I think when the new developments like, Cleves factory and the new residential developments, people will move into those, but there will be other cheaper properties available as well, for other renters. And I think as well, the more new properties come onto the market, people will want the higher standard, even though standards of rental accommodation has, thank God, improved significantly. There'll always be the properties that aren't to the standard or the energy ratings of other ones, and they will be a little bit cheaper as well and affordable.
Okay, in terms of rental, because Limerick hasn't really experienced the built rent maybe that Dublin has, and Cork to a lesser extent, and it hasn't had the same investment in terms of student accommodation, while obviously there has been some, probably not as much as is required. Where do you see the next wave of investment coming in to build that? Because there are huge ambitious plans by the local authority there. Do you think that will be supported by private development and private investment?
Yeah, well, again, it's the cost of building, I mean, it's just, it's so expensive to build. As we know now, in the last 6 months, again, materials are just going up and up and up in price. And there is a lack of passion and excitement from the private builder to build because of margins, really, with between the local housing authorities and, the price of materials, the margins they feel are kind of too small to build. They're not, that is a challenge. It's becoming more government based, the building. So I'm not sure what can be done about that. Having said that, conversely to that, the prices of apartments on the market can't be built for those prices. So that's an attractive place for a first-time buyer to go, or again, it's attractive to outside investors, because they're not going to be built for those prices again. We're still selling in Limerick at prices that you can't actually build them for. So that's another way of looking at the attractiveness of buying in Limerick.
And that type of development then tends to go to private investors, smaller operators, as opposed to institutional investors, and we know en masse across Ireland that profile of investors is leaving the market, in Limerick. But I actually, in one way, I think they're leaving the Dublin market, but actually they're still very evident in the Waterford and Limerick markets. But in terms of new supply coming on for both the private or the new build and secondhand market, since you've been back in the office, and indeed during lockdown, secondhand homes, are they coming to the market, or what kind of attitudes are you experiencing from your sellers?
Yeah, I mean, what's happening now, I'm seeing, Carl, a lot of, is that people who had been waiting for the right time to sell, and this could be over a number of years, this could be since the recovery, they're going, right, now I'm going to sell. Now, as we know, and rightly so as well, the RTB introduced longer notice periods to tenants. So I am almost certain this goes right across the board with agents in the city. There are a huge amount of notices gone out to tenants in the last number of weeks. Some of them could be up to a year giving them notice. So people who have investment properties that maybe still aren't at the peak price that they paid for them way back in 2005 or 6, they could still be 30% below that because they might have bought them on a tax incentive. Those people are now saying, well, I think this is as good as it's going to get for a certain period for me in terms of the recovery. I'm going to get out now, I mean, it's good for them in that they're trying to recoup some of their losses, still huge losses for a lot of those people. But then it's a case of, right, where are the tenants going to go? You're back to that, But secondhand houses, secondhand properties, they are coming onto the market, and people are finding it's a good time for them to sell. The trader up, side of the market is doing really, really well. What's happening again now, and it's the first time I've seen it in, I'd say since the boom, that people are actually now going out to look for properties confidently knowing that they can sell their 3 or 4 bed semi in the suburbs and maybe even slightly outside within a matter of weeks. So whereas previously people just wouldn't speculate like that, they're now actually in a speculative mindset again about trader upping because of the confidence they have in. They mightn't have all their funds ready immediately, but they know they can sell very quickly.
And so the pipeline of buyers and finance ready buyers is there.
It is, yeah, and I've seen that in the last, since we've opened up, suddenly, there's all these buyers that have all their mortgage approval, and last year, this time last year, or maybe a month, 2 months back, sales were falling through and mortgage approvals were actually, being taken back. And suddenly, all of a sudden, it's all come together again, whether that work was going on in the background all the time or people just felt, right, we need to get those mortgage approvals through so people can start buying.
Yeah. Have you come across many buyers who are rushing to use the approval in principle that they have because they're concerned maybe that they won't, if they have to reapply, that there might be a change in circumstances?
Yeah, and again, from experience, a frenzy can always be a dangerous sign. Like we all, you often feel that frenzy, but it'll turn around again and something else will happen. And, they will get back on that ladder, because either new builds will come in and they'll be much higher priced and the secondhand stuff will still be there. So, I mean, personally, I hate to see somebody rushing to get a house. I only met a couple yesterday and they looked at a house and it was a first time buy and they were humming and hawing about it. I knew they were, as you said there, in a hurry to spend their money. And I was kind of saying to them, look, like, you're probably going to be here 20 years, are you sure you want to really rush this? Is this where you want to bring up a family? Like, are you happy with the garden? Do you like the area? Do you like what you see when you look out? So, like, I think people need to be cautious. It is their life after all. And, like, don't just spend your mortgage out of fear that nothing else is going to come up. But there is a bit of that definitely in the air, Carol. Yeah.
Yeah, no, look, I'm seeing that not just in Dublin, but actually right across the country, and where it's not driven by maybe mortgage pressure, it's driven by supply pressure, that there's just so little supply in the market that buyers think if they don't take this, there will be nothing else. And you're right, frenzy is a terrible place to be making big financial decisions from.
Yeah.
During lockdown, with the restrictions that were there, did your firm sale agree many properties to people remotely only? Like, did you sale agree many properties for buyers who didn't set foot inside the property?
Well, I suppose the type of properties that we sale agreed during the lockdown were to investors. Okay. So, and they probably would have been an investor that I already had an existing relationship with, that kind of we had the know, like, and trust relationship. And they would say, is there anything going? And I might have somebody that, sold with the tenant in the property, which is great. I love to see that as well. So I might have said, well, this person, instead of serving notice to the tenant, I'd say to them, well, look, if you can get market value, if you want to sell to another investor, they'll keep the tenant, and they would normally say happy days. So we did a few of those. People expanded their portfolio. People who wanted to get out, I suggested them, well, if you want to leave the tenant, I have a buyer. So I did, I suppose, about 5 of those.
Okay. And none fell through when the restrictions eased, because that's one of the things we're tracking at the moment, because there's no data on that. So we're actually through Property District, we're tracking that ourselves from speaking to agents to see what properties had sale agreed in order to accommodate viewings during the restricted period and have subsequently fallen through.
Yeah. No, I've heard, Karen, like there was like there were, the virtual viewings where people were just, bidding on property. I tried to stay out of that a little bit, because I suppose that just taking a more thorough kind of vetting process of the buyer and the potential buyer. Again, I'm the type of person that feels that, aside from maybe the investment department where somebody already has one in the complex, is familiar with the OMC, etc., they really do need to step foot in the property. And I like to keep that message out there, because it's very good for the industry, it's very good for the business of a state agency. And we certainly, me personally anyway, I certainly don't want to, to put it out there that you can just sell a property and never have to walk in the door of it, because I'm conscious of my own role in the industry, you know, and what we do, you know, and I don't want everything to go just online into a transactional based, you know, setup. But I don't think that will happen anyway.
You
But
know, in a way though, Helen, that nearly brings us full circle to where we started the conversation in terms of the fact that this is a trust-based relationship, that it is always about the people, and that technology really has a role in facilitating that. So I mean, you mentioned, and I'm conscious of time here, that we need to wrap up shortly, but you had mentioned that, you know, during lockdown was the time you embraced not just digital media for your own firm, but an element of putting yourself out there, not just as the company and the business, but yourself, Helen McCormack. And I know that your company achieved some important accreditation over the period as well for thought leadership. What was that?
Yeah, I got a thought leader accreditation in real estate from the All Ireland Business Foundation, which was, you know, a fantastic honour during the lockdown. So it kept the spirits really high. And I'd heard about the All Ireland Business Foundation through, I'd been invited to an event in Croke Park some years ago, and I was very impressed by the calibre of businesses associated with it and keynote speakers at the events. So I kind of thought, you know, since 2016, I mean, I highly value technology as well. You know, Carl, we had been implementing systems, processes, you know, to offer a better service to our customers in terms of our management and our sales sector. And I kind of thought, I'd like to go through the process of auditing to see how I come out after having done all that work, you know. And I was delighted then, you know, to have got the 3 stamps of performance, trust, and customer centricity, because I wanted to position our business as having excellent customer service and being able to share our knowledge and guide and assist people in their decisions. And the thought leader accreditation is a nice, you know, a nice little flowery addition piece that goes on top of what really is the most important thing, the excellence and the customer service. So I was really delighted with that. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. I think it's a great achievement for your own firm, but I think it's a really important signal for the sector, you know, that the sector is working well with technology, that it all comes down to serving the client, you know, that it is a customer focus and client focused business. You know, at the end of the day, it all comes down to service. So if technology is the tool you use, great. But it comes down to service, it comes down to people. And by the way, you know, again, because my focus is always on the technology, I do appreciate this timely reminder of that. So thank you for that. And also, you know, it's great to get an understanding of what's happening in Limerick, because it is very much coming to the fore in terms of urban regeneration, some really exciting things, projects planned. And I understand what you're saying there, that maybe the passion and the appetite isn't there from the private sector investment yet, but that's surely the next step. That's surely the next step in the process, and it's something we'd love to see for Limerick, because the potential is there. It just needs to be tapped in. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks very much, Carol. You'll have to come down sometime, show you around.
I would only love to. Now the restrictions have eased. That's exactly my plan. That was Helen McCormack, owner of Helen McCormack Estate Agents based in Limerick. We need to take a quick break now. Stay tuned.